Katie from What Katie Did, and welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking about corsets and wearing corsets in summer in particular, and how to keep cool while wearing a corset. And I know that not only have I left it rather late in the year, unless of course you're in Australia, but also we are filming in a torrential downpour, so that if you hear any background noise, that will be it. There hasn't been so much talk recently about wearing corsets in hot weather, but over the last few years there have been lots of discussions about whether you should wear a sheer corset or a single layer corset. So I'm going to give my views on this. To put it bluntly, the whole choice of wearing a corset in hot weather, and it is a choice, is not really the most sensible thing to do anyway when you want to keep cool. If keeping cool is your main priority, then corsets don't come into the equation at all. So there is no such thing as a cool corset. Any corset you wear will make you warmer, whether it's a single layer, whether it's a mesh, or whether it's a traditional 3-layer corset. When it comes down to it, I wear a corset nearly every day, and I've worn one in very hot tropical climates. And if you're used to wearing a corset, then really you don't notice any difference at all. So what I would say to you is that if you're new to wearing corsets and it is very hot outside, it's a heat wave, it wouldn't be the ideal time to wear a corset for the first time, because your body wouldn't be used to it. That goes for wearing corsets at all. Really, you have to listen to your body, and you need to be quite sensible about these things. And if something is causing you discomfort, then you just take it off. But when it comes down to corsets making you hotter or cooler, then the most sensible thing is not to wear a corset at all. But of course, if you want to wear a corset, then like me, I wear corsets throughout the year in all kinds of climates. And when it's hot, wearing a corset, I wouldn't say makes it tremendously more warmer than not wearing a corset, and that is because I am so used to wearing a corset on a day-to-day basis. So if you are used to wearing a corset on a day-to-day basis, then wearing one in hot weather really shouldn't make much difference at all. Over the years, we have done a few corsets which are made from a very, very fine mesh, and again, these won't necessarily make you cooler in hot weather, but I tended to wear them during hot weather simply because in warmer climates you wear less clothing in general, and if you're wearing a thinner cotton dress, if you wear a very thin corset, then it's less likely to show under clothing, and that's the main reason for wearing a fine mesh corset. You have to remember that if you're wearing a very fine mesh corset, that they are less durable than wearing a traditional 3-layer corset. And I can remember I never had problems with our sheer corsets until I wore one walking to work. And I've said before, I walk 2 miles to work and 2 miles back. So yeah, I can walk in a corset and I can breathe in a corset. And I was wearing my sheer corset, and I could feel something gnawing at my waist. And I was walking to work and thinking, oh my goodness, what's happened here? And when I got to work, I looked and I noticed a tiny hole in my corset, and then I realised that the dress I was wearing, it was a vintage dress, and it had plastic boning over the bust, so that the plastic boning finished at the waist, and there was a raw edge of plastic boning, and this is what had actually made a hole in the corset. And what I found with sheer corsets, it wasn't the corset you had to worry about as such, it was what you were wearing on top of the corset. For example, if you had rough boning, or if you were sitting next to a smoker or something like that, it's something simple and silly that would cause a hole, and not the actual corset itself, but some external force. So I did used to advise people that if they were going to go for a sheer corset, that you would have to be very careful with it. Another thing is, I can remember talking to the corsetier, Mr. Pearl, and he said that when he did single layer corsets for some of his clients who really wore corsets 23/7, he didn't expect them to last them longer than a month. And while our sheer corsets, I mean, I never wore the fabric out at all. If he says that, you have to take that into account. So if you are going for a sheer corset, they're not going to last as long as a traditional 3-layer corset, and also they're not going to make you very much cooler at all. The only benefit they do have is that they'll be, because they're sheerer and thinner, they're going to be less visible under clothing. There was a fashion a few years ago for sheer corsets made out of some kind of mesh, some kind of sports mesh, and our factory did make a sample for me earlier this year. He said he'd been asked to make them for another corset company, and did we want to see one? So I said, yeah, go ahead. So he made one in our Extreme Vamp pattern, which is, the Extreme Vamp is the corset I wear every day. And it was the first time I'd tried a mesh corset with an open weave, and I was looking forward to trying it. I had read from other people that this kind of mesh does stretch. Found it the most uncomfortable thing in the world. You wouldn't believe. As I say, it was the same pattern as our other corsets. It was the same pattern as our 3-layer Extreme Vamp corset, but with the mesh is you had the waist tape inside, and you have to remember the waist tape doesn't stretch at all, whereas the sports mesh, it officially doesn't stretch, but it does have some give. So I found that my waist, all the pressure was on my waist, and there was nothing just above my waist or below my waist to take off the pressure. It was just simply this 1-inch band around the waist, which was really, really so uncomfortable. So that is definitely a no-no, and I'm going to film this and show you, hopefully, so you can see the difference. I don't know whether it will be visible on film, but it was so much more uncomfortable than wearing a 3-layer traditional corset. What I have said over the last 3 years, and I'm putting this out there, so hopefully now it's September, that by next spring I actually will get around to do this, is to work on a single layer cotton corset. And of course cotton is breathable, and so it will be slightly more comfortable than a 3-layer construction, hopefully. And because it's a single layer construction, it will have less bulk under summer clothing. It won't make you a lot cooler. It won't, as I said before, wearing a corset isn't the most sensible thing to do during a heat wave, but it will hopefully give a smoother line under more lightweight clothing. I have been hesitant to do a single layer because basically the cost of doing a single layer and doing a 3-layer corset, it will basically be the same, because when it comes to it, the actual satin fabrics aren't a huge amount of cost with a corset. It's the components and the time it takes to actually make it. So that won't actually change. In fact, because it's a new style, it might actually make the sewers, it might actually take them slightly long, because it'll be a new style and we'll have to do new waistbands and things like that. So it's not going to be any cheaper at all, but I would like one for myself, and so if I'm going to make it for myself, then we need to see if we can make it for you guys as well. So keep an eye out for that, and I will do my very, very best to get it done for next summer, because as I say, it has been on my hit list for the last 3 years now, and it really is about time that we put my plan into action. If you do have any questions or experience with wearing corsets in hot climates, which you'd like to let me know about, please comment below. And in the meantime, take care, and I'll catch up with you soon.